Hello, and welcome to this second video where I explore some ways to combine traditional and digital workflows. This is a rough created in Photoshop. It's what I'm going to base the painting on. The idea is this is a Stargate wormhole station type of thing, located in some far-flung corner of the galaxy, with a spacecraft approaching to make a transition. To help with the perspective, given all the curves, I built this 3D model in Modo. If you want to know more about building reference models in 3D, check out my Vision X video where I cover it in more detail. This is a 3D render placed into the nebula scene in Photoshop. I lit the model in such a way as to emphasise the form, bouncing some light into the underside. A bit of artistic license, as with no atmosphere in space you wouldn't get that effect. So this is the final line drawing. Again, if you want to know more about how to convert your digital render into a line drawing, check out the Vision X video. This painting is going to be bigger than my printer can manage, so I'm printing the line drawing onto two pieces of inkjet paper. The drawings overlap so that I can line them up on a light box. Then I can cut through them in one go using a scalpel. Then I discard the waste and line up the two pieces, sticking them together with masking tape. Masking tape is transparent, so it won't get in the way when I'm tracing. So here I've laid the oil painting paper on top of the inkjet print and I'm tracing the outline. I'm using a soft charcoal pencil. Have to be careful not to smudge it too much, so I'm using a scrap piece of paper to rest my hand on. I'm tracing the border freehand. I could use a ruler, but I just like the loose look better. I don't want it to start looking too mechanical. You can see in this shot how I sharpen the pencil into a long tip. I get a better variety of marks that way. Once the outline is finished, I spray it with fixative before going on to the next step, as I don't want to smudge the work I've already done. I like to shade the drawing so I don't have to think about where the tones will go once I start painting. Anything I can do at this stage to make the actual painting go easier is a good thing. Now I'm using the long side of that sharp pencil point to shade a broad area in one go. So after fixing it once again, I'm going to mount it onto some hardboard using transparent acrylic gesso. I'm careful to cover the whole area as I don't want any parts not to stick down properly. Actually, in the interest of full disclosure, although I don't do it here, I've since discovered the best way is to paint both the board and the paper with the primer. Anyway, I didn't do that, so I place the drawing onto the gesso, pressing it down as best as I can. I get another piece of board on top, then weight it with books. That's my art book, The Art of Fred Gambino Dark Shepherd, by the way, available from Titan and Amazon if you're interested. I'll put a link in the text below. Finally, once it's dry, I add another layer of primer to give me a good sound surface to work on. So here's the final drawing. It's almost a shame to obliterate these drawings as I do quite like the look of them. You can see that it has smudged a bit, but it's not a problem. It won't smudge again as now it's encased in acrylic. So here's my palette from left to right: cerulean blue, ultramarine, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow deep, cadmium yellow light and white. I mix all the colours I need from these few. I use a glass palette. I have a neutral grey colour underneath and it's easy to clean. You can just scrape any dried paint off. In the last video I had a tint of orange over the painting. Check out the glare video if you haven't already. In that case the printer did it for me, but here I'm going to have to do it by hand. I'm using acrylic as I don't want to wait days for it to dry. I figured blue would be a good colour to complement the mainly warm colours I'm planning for the final thing. It's a thin wash. I don't want to get it too wet though, as I find it will lift the paper sometimes. I keep the brush strokes loose to give it a bit of life. The blue feels dry to the touch after a few minutes, but I leave it for an hour or so to make sure it's thoroughly dry. I start as ever by putting in the darkest tones using a mix of ultramarine and burnt sienna to make a black. Putting in the darkest tones helps me judge the lighter shades. It's particularly important at the back of the ship as I need to know how light to make the nebula behind it. Paint the planet in freehand rather than using masks or a compass. And then I start on the background, again with the darkest area. Now adding alizarin crimson and white. The lightest part is a mixture of cadmium yellow deep and white. Here I've turned the painting upside down to get a better angle applying the paint. It's easier to paint away from a line than paint up to it. So I've turned in the painting again as the angle was starting to get difficult. I'm using a chisel brush to help get the edge I want. A bit more cad yellow deep into the mix where the dark and light parts of the nebula meet. I'm using a mahl stick here to steady my hand while I add details to the side of the ship. To add stars, I use a toothbrush loaded with thin paint and sprinkle them on. It gives a nice random arrangement of size and opacity. I'm using my hand to protect parts of the picture where I don't want stars, but I do get the odd white spot in places they shouldn't be. It doesn't matter though, I can just wipe it off. So, this is the final painting. One thing I changed was the arrangement of asteroids. Previous composition had them curving to the right, taking your eye out of the picture. Now they direct the viewer towards the ship. I've also used a bit more artistic license, fading the dark tones to add an illusion of depth. There's no atmosphere in space, of course, so that wouldn't happen, but we are painting for earthbound viewers. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of it and it gives you some inspiration. If you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time when I'm going to try yet another painting surface and tackle something a bit more challenging.